Well, good afternoon, my friends. It's me, Joshua. And yeah, I'm going to talk about things that people don't want to talk about because I don't want to talk about politics. But I have to say, this isn't about politics per se. This is more about how people are letting it completely run their life and how they feel about just about everything. Everything seems to be based off of your political view these days, which side is the enemy, At least this is the illusion that's given off by the internet. Now, I say this because I I've had my own disagreements with, let's just say, the way things are, the status quo. My whole life I've had issues with the way politics are run in this country, and I can only speak for my own country. But it's become, just so ridiculous that we're at the point now where if you want to immerse yourself in discussions about anything political, you're going to be chastised, harassed, demeaned. It's not even fucking worth it. In other words, there was a time when I was younger where a person who was left or right oriented might have a discussion and say, well, I feel this way about this. No, I feel this way. And it would pretty much end at that. But people aren't going to ditch family and friends over some disagreement about a politician. And I thought that maybe this was overblown, but I have seen so many posts and discussions about people who say, yeah, I don't talk to any of my family anymore because they voted for A or B. And I think, okay, this is just the internet. This is not real life, which brings me to a post I had yesterday about corruption and billionaires and grifters. And somebody said, well, this is just on the internet, don't think this represents society as a whole. And I was trying to explain, no, I don't. I don't. I think a majority of people are good people and care about each other and want to do the right thing and will help out their neighbor or anybody who needs it. It's the people who have the most power, the most influence, and the most wealth that seem to be the worst people. And I know by saying that, instantly, those who are, let's just say, a lot of people in office are going to come to mind right now. A lot of people who are in the public eye will come to mind. And people would say, well, what do you have against people just because they're rich? No, it's not just because they're rich. I know that a vast accumulation of wealth is only acquired through screwing over at least a couple of people in your life. This just seems to be par for the course. But I also have seen something much more important throughout the last, 10, 12 years. That if you come armed with every fact, figure, graph, and statistic you can possibly imagine, every poll, name it, if a person doesn't want to believe something, they're not going to care. So if you want to argue your point on Twitter and you think it's really going to resolve anything, there was a time when people thought that that would be a possibility. Just the way that, say, 10 years ago, YouTube had a huge, influx of atheist versus Christian and religious content, where it was this battle back and forth of who's right and who's wrong. All kinds of different, seminars and people speaking and debates on stage. And we all came to the conclusion, those of us who were paying attention, that atheists have dug their heels into their own religion. And the Christian apologists who want to argue with them are just the ones who really don't even understand how to read between the lines or the metaphors, that everybody seems stuck in their extreme, and that the people in the middle said, I'm not even going to listen to this shit. I'll take my own version of God. I don't need anybody to tell me there isn't a God, nor anyone to tell me what God wants. Now, bring it to politics. It's the same exact thing. We think that a politician knows what we need or knows what's right or what we want, and that there's some politician out there that's going to help us through all the hard times and that everything's just going to go smooth and work easy. But let me tell you, my friends, if you live in this world and you are an adult and you have even slightly pondered the complexity of the system we have in place, you'll see that There are no quick fixes to our problems. You can't just end inflation. You can't just fix a crisis unless it's something, because throwing money at things is great, but it doesn't solve the problems. What we need is social impact, social cohesion, and community efforts. So, in other words, if you're dividing the country into red and blue, even metaphorically or in the minds of the people, then they're not going to want to work with their neighbors unless they're sure that they're, of the same political affiliation. Now, this is the extreme. But here's where I get to my point. When you go out in the real world, you find that firefighters aren't asking you if you're a Democrat or a liberal or a conservative. You know, yes, there are places where people will judge others based on their affiliation. But what I'm saying is when a major disaster happens and a neighbor's helping a person out of a flood or a fire, they're not asking their political affiliation. They're not saying, oh, well, too bad. You shouldn't have been a Democrat. You shouldn't have been a Republican. This is some petty, pathetic bullshit that our forefathers warned against. So if you're even a staunch, forefather worshiping constitutionalist, you should realize that they all warned against this kind of shit. The two-party system was warned against by the forefathers. Billionaires and people with influence in office was warned against by the forefathers. And also allowing the military to kind of run their own show was, yes, warned about by our forefathers. So everybody wants to credit the founders of the nation with having all these ideals that have been ruined by these woke mobs, but really it's the opposite. But it's a little bit of everything. America is a place that is founded on individual freedom and religious freedom from persecution. Those who say it's a Christian nation, they're just wrong. Many of the founding fathers were actually, and the earliest presidents were Freemasons. And mind you, Freemasons are not necessarily Christians. However, it is a prerequisite that you believe in God or a higher power, but it can be any version of that God. Now, what we've learned in the 21st century is that there are many different ways to acquire understanding of God and many different ways to look at the world. And there are still a lot of holdouts. Even though atheism is on the rise, there's still this other aspect people don't consider when interviewing people about what they believe. That, do you believe that there is a higher power or a consciousness in the universe that is above and beyond humans? And most people will say yes. A majority of people believe that there is a consciousness higher and smarter than us in some way, shape, or form. So what does that mean? It means that even the atheists, or what people would call atheists, or there are many different names for people who don't believe, but let me say that when it gets to the debate of religion, we've learned to overcome it and say, okay, at least you believe in some higher power and that there is something greater to this life. The same way with politics. We need to overcome this hurdle of you believe in this policy and you must believe in this policy too because you support this candidate. Get over it and move past it. Don't assume that everybody thinks one way. It is so shallow and so weak as a human to cast everyone under the bus as being the enemy, or at least half of your nation or your society. So with that said, can we look at things a little bit more calmly and rationally and talk about things that matter without having to put each other down? The ad hominem attacks, the fallacies, the straw man debates, bringing in bullshit that doesn't even matter. Or when, it's hard. I have to watch my words here because if I bring up specific examples, a lot of them are recent. And therefore people will say, oh, you're just a Trump hater. I'll be straight honest with you. I actually argued on Trump's behalf for the last 6 months. Not saying that I think he's going to be a great president, but saying, look, I think he's going to win, and I think people are going to just have to hope for the best, that maybe he really has the best influences around him and he wants to make choices that are going to better the world or better the nation for Americans, while at the same time not cutting off all of our connections with other people. And, so far what I've seen hasn't been that. It's been the opposite. But I'm still open-minded. And that's what I wished people would have done with even Biden. Like, he passed an infrastructure bill. I respect that. There are certain things that are done and accomplished, but here's the problem, the impasse. People don't want to see results. They want to find problems. Let me repeat this. It's very important. People do not want to see results and progress. They want to argue that there aren't any, and there isn't any, and that it's just horrible. And this is shown on the liberal side by all the bullshit that's been screamed about how racism is worse than ever, when you find that actually most of us who grew up in the fucking 80s and 90s were like, wait, I thought we were past this. Sure, there's always going to be bias and judgment, and there's always going to be racism. But is that really a social issue? It wasn't until people wanted to make it that way. Is there still institutional racism or bias? Of course. We need to work that out. But to make it the forefront issue made everybody kind of build up their defenses again. It makes everybody feel like they're the victim, and the other half feel like that they're being chastised just for being, let's just say, a straight white male. And the minute you say that, you get attacked by the left saying, oh, here you go, another conservative talking point. So I've already kind of delved too far into that. I just needed to have a preamble to where I'm going with this. How do you not let politics affect you? Opt the fuck out. And what I mean by that is, you can still have debates with your friends, family, online, whatever. Express your opinion. But you don't have to feel emotionally attached to that. And I found a lot of people say that they aren't, but you can just tell that they are. You have an argument with somebody and they say, oh, whatever, you've got your opinion, I've got mine. Then they don't talk to you anymore. I have friends who have lost good friends over it and really been upset. I have a conservative friend who, because he supported Trump, his liberal friend, who we'd all grew up with, left and never talked to him again, just completely abandoned their friendship. And they had done so much together. They'd lived together, they'd worked together, all known each other for like 25, 30 years. That's all it took. Voting for somebody different and having a different opinion. And I thought, this friend of mine who's the Trump supporter is actually one of the kindest, most thoughtful individuals I know, with a heart of gold. Is he a little rough on the edges? Aren't we all? And does it mean that anybody knows better than others? And see, I'm already getting more involved and heated in this than I should. Not heated, but I guess animated, because there's so many directions I could go with this, and I want this discussion to be open and honest, to say, I don't give a shit if you support any candidate. I didn't like either of the choices over the last 2 or 3 or 4 elections. Okay, I did vote or support Bernie. I even wrote him in on one of the elections because I thought, well, I'd give him a chance. Who knows? Things could be worse. But do I think he's the solution to all our problems? No. He's got his own issues. All of them do. Anybody who wants to be in charge has got to be a little fucked up in the head. And this is why anarchists have a really good point, And at any rate, I was going to say any rate, yeah. I say that too often. I say it at any rate, so I was going to say anyhow. Somebody mentioned that, like, at any rate, you say that a lot. I'm like, yeah, I do. I guess it's just my thing. So, at any rate, my solution to the problem of political debate and where we're at right now with the division is very simple. Because you can complain all day long, but if you don't have a solution or an idea, then shut the fuck up, right? Well, is to stop giving a shit, to stop associating ourselves with the idea. This is something it took me years to figure out. When a person gets mad at me because we're debating, it's not because I attack them. It's because I attack their beliefs. And having beliefs doesn't, it doesn't warrant your, exception from being attacked. You may have a belief, but a belief can belie you. It can be completely bullshit. You don't know if it's true. It's a fact that's a fact. It's a belief that's a belief. And you have to be able to prove your belief with evidence. And usually, if you have evidence, then you know it's a fact. So many people believe in God, right? I don't believe in God. I know God. I've experienced divinity in my own experiences. I don't have to prove it to anybody. I don't have to define it to anybody. I don't have to read a book or reinforce it to anyone. I just know that I'm part of God's plan, that I am God, that we're all God, that we're all going back to source, and that we continuously flow in and out from this energy state. When you truly believe, it leads to knowing. And I think that I bring this up because a lot of folks they think that the issue is that we're not religious enough, that without that we don't have the morals and values, and that's just not true. It's not a fact. Humans have a natural tendency to want to have social cohesion and care about one another. It's in our hearts. And I think if we can look through the surface bullshit and the propaganda that the people who have the power and the money and the influence are feeding us, then we can realize that we're being lied to. And when people are being lied to so blatantly in my country, and they still fall for it, it tells me that people don't want the truth. They want to believe what's convenient for them. And with this, we have to take that as a lesson and say, we are not going to change that. You are not going to convince people that they need to look deeper. You can come up with all the facts, figures, and rationale you want, and people are going to believe what they believe. So the solution is to say, okay, agree to disagree, and we move on. Because most of the day-to-day issues, sure, you got to fight for what's right. But, this comes down to usually state and local issues. Whatever the federal government's doing, you're never going to be able to change it. And that comes down to the thing I've said 1,000 times. You have a circle of concern and a circle of influence. Your circle of concern you can't do shit about. Your circle of influence, you can. Influence the things you can and don't worry about it. Reminds me of the AA quote again. God grant me the serenity to change the things I can. What is it? Change the things I can, accept the things I can, or God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And this goes back to, way before AA. Just a general acceptance that things are the way they are, and that you are better off having good relationships with people and just saying, even if you have to say, okay, you win, you're right. When a person gets upset or they feel a certain way about a politician or an idea or a law, just say, cool. You don't have to lose friends and family over politics. And I urge people not to, because splitting up the family and dividing friends, that should remind you of a very, very well-known propaganda technique, which is divide and conquer. And this is what's been going on for so fucking long. I can't believe people don't see it. So I don't care who you voted for. I don't care what you believe in. If you're a person with a heart, I love you, man. And even if you're not, I love you too. So I'll see you all next time. Thanks for coming along to the 15-Minute Free Thinking Podcast. It's not easy to talk about these things because I don't know what the solution is. This one will be available on video on my Carpo719 YouTube channel, as well as the podcast version, which is 15-Minute Free Thinking. If you'd like to contribute to the channel, there's a link to Patreon. At the very least, if you're on YouTube, leave a comment, leave a like, give me your thoughts on this thing, that we call, politics and modern debate. And I feel like maybe we can move past this, really grow up a little bit. What do you think? Peace out.